And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I think there's a good likely that at least some people hearing this now are new to the game of Versus, and that's what today's episode is going to be about. I'm not going to talk about any specific cards or game mechanics, but I am going to talk about the overwhelming, surprising, the explosion of interest that has happened to Versus as a result of what I would call the unlikeliest of IPs, AEW. So I'm going to take a little bit of a running start at this. First of all, welcome. If you're here because you're a wrestling fan, I'm happy to have you. But I am going to take a little bit of a running start at this topic, and I think I've gone over this a few times on the show recently about how when I was initially introduced to the idea of there being AEW cards, I was kind of resistant. The idea that Captain America is going to punch, I don't know, Jade Cargill, and that's going to be a fair fight. Like, I'm going to be Galactus, and you're going to be Sting. It didn't fit the sort of headcanon that I had for Versus. But I was challenged on that, and I was unable to come up with any real specific way of defending it other than just like, well, hey, I'm not a wrestling fan, and the idea that wrestlers not knowing anything about wrestling, I think was part of the issue that I had here. I have since uh, done some research on wrestling, and I think it's very silly. I think people, if this is what you're into, that's completely fine. I like being silly. I like comic books. I like things that maybe some people might look at as being beneath the interests of an adult. And I'm unapologetic and unashamed of loving those things. So if wrestling is one of the things that you love, I have absolutely no shade to throw at it. But I also don't think we need to like be defensive about wrestling as a thing. Like, it's a form of entertainment. It's about as realistic as superhero comic books are. And as I understood that, like the types of hits that people take in, while it's not as hyper realistic as a comic, like people aren't flying, but a lot of the things that happen in wrestling are not real. Like, that would kill a regular person. This is not things that would, it doesn't make any sense if you try to apply like the laws of physics to some of the stuff that happens in these wrestling shows. So by coming at it from that direction and educating myself on this art form that I knew very little and almost nothing positive about, I have come around a little bit to appreciate the existence of wrestling. I'm still not going to be a wrestling fan, but I know more about it now. And one of the things that I've learned is how unbelievably popular this is. The number of Discord servers that I have been tagged in where people are like, hey, I don't know anything about this AEW versus thing, but I know a guy who does. And I've been called into multiple servers for totally different games to just come in and kind of give a rundown on what versus is, evangelize versus essentially. And that's awesome. And as cool as Mortal Kombat is, and as amazing as the boys, like, these expansions mean a lot more to me personally. This kind of reaction, it just wasn't the same. It wasn't even the same in the same category of reaction. Like, it feels to me like the AEW introduction is an order of magnitude bigger than any other outside IP we have ever brought into the game. Like, X-Files was fine, but I think it was Jason on the show a while back said it was past its prime. Buffy was way past its prime. These were all fine. Aliens, Predator to some degree. These are all things that sort of peaked a long time ago, and we're getting them in the verses. And we can't pretend like money doesn't have something to do with it. So for Upper Deck to shell out the cash for the licensing fees to bring something that's hot like Mortal Kombat and the boys, and again, confusingly to me, but again, maybe me being confused about the popularity of AEW is just further confession of my ignorance about wrestling. This is really exciting stuff to see the game this many years in get this just massive burst of exposure and hopefully from that some enduring popularity, and to see Upper Deck throw money into like even the boys lanyards at Gen Con and some of the photos we had of like the advertising stuff. It feels like the marketing for Versus has picked up over the last year, and that's really exciting because one of the problems, I, gosh, who was I think I was talking to the Recover Ready guys, and we talked about how the game sells itself, but the marketing piece just hasn't been there. Like it's people don't know about the game, and once they find out about it, they tend to like it. But then the hurdle becomes, well, who do I play with? And of course, that's one of the things I want to address. If you're new to Versus and you're here by way of the boys or a friend introducing you or an AEW fan, welcome. But also, where are you going to play this game? So a lot of game stores do not have that vibrant of a presence to support Versus in the store. The OP kits are released in an uneven way. I don't think any have been released for a very long time. It has been a little bit of a difficulty because you got to think about it from the store's perspective. If the store's going to have people in there and have employees overseeing the events and all that, they need to make some money on it. And with Versus, you buy your set once. There's no packs. There's no seal. There's none of that kind of stuff. So charging an entry fee can be a little bit tougher, especially when there isn't the prize support coming from Upper Deck, which I wish they did a little better in that area. So you may find a challenge in finding local people. Now, I don't want to discourage anybody. Go to your store, talk to people, evangelize the game. It's a great way to make friends and meet people. I've made a lot of friends through this game over the years. Uh, but be prepared that if a local scene doesn't take off, all hope is not lost because there's still lots of ways to play this game with other people who are just as enthusiastic about it as you are over the internet. We have had a webcam competitive scene for many years, and it really took off over COVID. And it is vibrant. There are different formats. There's different groups that put on events, so there is a lot to do, as well as just pick up games. If you're looking for something a little more casual and you don't want to get into a tournament, there's plenty of players out there who are more than happy to not only walk you through a pickup game over webcam, but even try to help you get your webcam set up. Like it can be intimidating to, on top of learning a new game, have to also set up a camera and your computer and jump through all these hoops to just play some cards. But I don't want those stumbling blocks or those challenges to be off ramps for people to not be able to enjoy the game of Versus. There is a great, vibrant, supportive community here who is not going to say mean things to you if you have new questions that we've answered 100 times. We have a community on Discord. We have a community on Facebook. There's a lot of great information on Reddit. There's a bunch of content creators in the scene that are making cool things that are going to help you become a bigger fan of Versus. So, as a longtime player of the game, I cannot remember another time where there was a release. Maybe the release of Legacy, because there was a huge drought until those cards came out. So that was a really, really big deal. But that was also a very long time ago, and the game was a lot smaller then. So the game has grown over those years, and now with the release of AEW, it feels like there has been just an explosion of interest and new people coming in. And I couldn't be happier to see it. So normally the show we will dive into talking about actual cards, game mechanics, events, formats, things of this nature, rather than just kind of ramble about how cool it is to see the game doing well. But as I started to think about show topics today, the one thing that was on my mind, more than going over the AEW cards themselves, the one thing that was on my mind is how impressed I was at how just unbelievably popular the wrestling IP has been, and it just getting new people in. Like I didn't know this kind of popularity existed for wrestling. People I hang out with don't really watch wrestling, generally speaking. So I was unaware how fervent and how numerous wrestling fans were. So my enthusiasm for this AEW set has gone up considerably since its release because I see how good it is for the game and how many people it's. I know personally of 4 or 5, around 10 people that either played old Versus or checked out Versus 2PCG and are not players of the game, but they're coming back for AEW. Or they're brand new to the game and they're jumping in to learn it just for AEW. That's amazing. I love hearing that kind of stuff. As a comparison, I know of exactly one person who started playing Versus because of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer IP. So this is just all a long 10-minute ramble about how excited I am to see new people in the community and how surprised I am to see this volume of people brought in by an IP as I guess cool. I guess instead of calling it silly, I need to start calling AEW cool because a lot of people think it's cool and now they're playing my favorite game. So, to all of those new people, welcome. To all of the established players, man, this is good news for us. I love seeing this. So, I want to shout out to all my patrons. As always, they keep the lights on around here. If you want to support the show and the work we're doing, patreon.com/the build phase. You can join the coolest clubhouse in Versus on our patron only Discord. All right, my name is Mr. Ben. This has been the build phase. And next time we're going to talk about, I think, every card in the AEW box. That's my plan. Or, depending upon scheduling, I want to get our current world champion, Jose, congrats, Jose, on the show to talk about his path to victory and that absolutely ridiculous and amazing AEW belt. So, very positive stuff coming out of Gen Con. And definitely make sure you check out the Apex coverage. It's going to be posted over the next few days. Vern said stuff about videos, articles. They've got a lot going on over there. And since they were boots on the ground at Gen Con, I'm really curious to see what their take was on it. So, till next time, go win some games.